Welcome to yet another tutorial video. This one in particular is for dynamic bones. This is a pretty often requested one, and thankfully it should be pretty quick. But dynamic bones are a way to basically make things like your bow, or your hair, or your skirt, or whatever you have, or your tail if you've got one of those, or your ears. I've seen them used on ears before. To move around. Basically, when you're moving around in game, it'll kind of swoosh around with you like it's following you. Um, or you can even interact with it with your hands. So I could put my hands on the skirt here and it would push the skirt around, or on the bow, it would push the bow around. Um, so this asset is a script that you can buy on the asset store for $20. It is if you are interested in making really good looking avatars and having really good feedback from the avatar and make it feel a little bit more real, then that is definitely a $20 well spent. So what do dynamic bones actually do? What they do is they attach to bones in the body. In particular on this one, I have a skirt root, I believe. Yep, right here. A skirt parent that has all of these skirt bones on here, all 27 of them, and all, let's see here, all 5 children. So what is that? Yeah, 6. So 6 times 20, 28 bones for the skirt here. You may have seen the optimization video I've also had where I suggest against using this in cases of large amounts of skirt bones, but I'm going to use it here as a use case regardless, and for the hair as well. But anyways, um, they allow it to move around, and it lets the bones kind of move, and because the bones are weighted to the skirt, it then moves the skirt around. So there are some potential problems with dynamic bones. First off, as I've again mentioned before in the optimization video, they can have a lot of lag issues. You can run into a lot of problems where you have too many dynamic bones and you're going to just basically burn CPU cycles just to move your skirt around. Additionally, if you incorrectly assign or incorrectly exclude certain bones, or if you put bones in the wrong place on a model, you can run into some serious problems. The most heinous, I guess, offenders in that particular case are when people put scripts onto the dynamic bone scripts onto their hips. It screws up sitting animations. It makes you go all wiggly if you don't do the exclusions correct, that kind of thing. Which is why in my bone issues video, I actually cover making things like the skirt parent and the hair parent, which make avoiding these problems very easy. So let's figure out how to actually add a dynamic bone. Let's do it to the skirt first. So there are 2 ways to do, or 2 places to put basically the script. I prefer to put it on the root of the object. You can also put it on the bone that you actually want to assign it to, but I'm going to put it on the root here. So I'm going to hit add component, and I'm going to type dyn for dynamic bone, and I'm going to click on dynamic bone. So what I'm then going to do, you can see that there's a root field here. I'm going to drag the bone that I want to attach the root of the bone, or attach the bone that I want to animate and all of its children to animate, and you'll see that all these white lines pop up. Might be kind of hard to see in YouTube after the compression, but you can see it in full 1440p mode. But these basically indicate that there are dynamic bones here. And if you want a very simple setup, you're basically done. It doesn't look great in this particular mode, but you can see that it acts, well, it doesn't act like a skirt should, but it certainly it moves around. So you can see that it's very springy by default. It's kind of like, actually, I'm not really sure what this would be like, but that is definitely not how a skirt works. So we're going to mess with some of these other settings. Update rate, always leave it 60. If you put it above 60, then it's going to get cut down to 60 anyways when you upload to VRChat. If you put it below 60, it's going to look like garbage. So we'll skip over that. Update mode, leave that on normal. I have not tested these other ones. They might be useful or interesting, but honestly, I haven't messed with them yet. If you have, let me know and I can put out a different video because YouTube doesn't allow annotations anymore. Cool, thanks, YouTube. So damping is the first option you have, and if you remember your high school physics, damping a spring basically means that if a spring is oscillating and you have dampening on it, it means that over time it will slowly stop the oscillation. So if you see in our mode right here that we have all this damping going on here, or not damping going on here, and then it dampens over time. So what we can do is we can change this, and I'm changing this in play mode. but if I do this, it won't save this, but I'm just doing it for demonstration purposes. So don't do your work in play mode. Please, you'll lose a ton of work. Make sure this button is not pushed down if you actually want to save your work. So anyways, let's change this to 0.5 and see what that looks like. Well, that looks a little different. So now damping is a little bit different, but now if I move too quickly, as one tends to do in VRChat when you're running around, you can see her bloomers underneath there. So that's certainly not good. So let's fix that. Elasticity is how fast the bone or the dynamic bone will snap back to its original position. I'm actually not sure how this is going to work if I turn this up. Not 5, 0.5. So let's see what happens when we put it on 0.5. So you can see it kind of, I mean, it doesn't let things clip through as much anymore, but it looks weird, like it goes too fast. So let's turn that back down. I usually leave elasticity at 0.1. I also usually have damping at 0.5 because it doesn't really oscillate at all. So stiffness is another one that I don't use too much, but we can see what it looks like here. So move like that, and now let's see what it looks like here. I believe it affects the friction in between bones. God, that didn't look like anything to me. Did it look like anything to you? Huh. Let's check it all the way up. It doesn't move. When you max out stiffness, it doesn't move. That makes sense. Oh, it is. So stiffness is basically how hard it is to bend the joints in between each bone. So as you can see here, it kind of acts like it's just a concave dome. So let's turn this back down to 0.1 because I don't really use it. Now, inert either stands for the actual word inert, as in something that does not move or act, or it stands for inertia, which is basically a it's a function of what was it? Inertia is a property of matter. Yeah, that's what it was. Um, it's it basically represents how heavy the particular object is. So what I typically set this at for my skirt, because I've set this up several times, is 0.9, which is quite high. But what it does is it just makes movement very subtle. So it doesn't make it stiff, it just makes the movement very subtle. So if we turn that down a little bit, you can see that the movement gets less subtle. If we turn it basically all the way up, you can see that the movement barely happens. But yeah, I usually keep this around for my skirt around 0.9 or so. And that looks pretty good. So cool, we have all these different settings here. So now, uh, what what do these other settings do here? You have things called radius, which affects when you have colliders, and we'll get to that in a moment. If you set the radius to like 0.1, it'll be rather large depending on the scale of your model, so just kind of play around with this. What I usually have it at, or I try to keep it at, is like about this size for each one, and that usually works out pretty well with the collider use. This is something you have to play around with on your own. There's also radius distribution, which allows you to distribute the radius along the length of the bone chain that it's applied to. So if I do this, now the radius kind of goes down as you get towards the end of the skirt. You can do that with basically all of the different components here. So you could make stiffness go start pretty high and then go down pretty low when you come down here. That might look pretty cool. Just play around with it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is going to be playing around with stuff. So now another thing that you can do is you can add colliders. Now let's do this to my hands. Colliders are basically ways that you can interact with a dynamic bone, and it will push the dynamic bone around. You can use this, for example, on your hips to prevent the skirt from flying through your midsection, or on your head so that it prevents your hair from clipping into your head. We're going to do it on a hand so that it basically allows me to push on my hair or on my hand or on my skirt. So we're going to add a dynamic bone collider here. And you can see that this giant yellow circle appeared because the default value is stupid. We're going to reduce this to a very, very small size. Let's do like not even that. Yeah, there you go. Now you can see it's kind of offset also from where it should be. Don't drag this because you currently have your hand bone selected, and if you drag this, bad things happen. What you have to do is you have to adjust the center here. I see that the green arrow is pointing towards the tips of my fingers. Green is Y, so I'm going to adjust the Y value a little bit. Oh, that's going to fly it off into the distance. Can I hold down Alt and slowly adjust this? No, that's just Blender, I guess. Let's do 0.1. No. 0.01, 0.001. Okay. So it looks like that positive values push it down the hand. So there you go. I'm going to move it just kind of a little bit more over my hand itself, and then there you go. What you'll want to do is you can adjust the radius. You can also adjust the height because this is actually a capsule instead of a sphere. So if I set the height to 0.002, okay, 5, 6, 7. Oh, it's expanding in the wrong direction. Oh, but let's set it along the Y. So now it's actually a capsule along this distance. It looks like two spheres, but it's not. But yeah, now you could do this on like your leg or on your arm if you have like long hair, so it won't clip through your arm. And bound, you'll usually want this for outside. Basically what this means is when a dynamic bone hits the sphere from the outside, it will bounce off the outside. If you have it set to inside, the collisions will only occur on the inside, so it won't go outside of the collider, or at least it will attempt to not go outside of the collider. And I'm saying attempt because colliders are not foolproof. If you basically override the strength of the bone with how far you're pushing your collider into something, the bone will just clip through the collider. There's no way around that. Now, what else do we have to do? So if you want to copy this to your other hand, quick trick, you can just click on this little gear up here, hit copy component. Let's find my right hand, right shoulder, right upper arm, lower right arm, hand right. Let's apply right here. Let's say paste as new, and let's go look at the other hand, and it looks like it's about the same. So there you go. But we're not done just yet because this dynamic bone script that's running on the skirt doesn't know to pay attention to these two colliders. So what you have to do is you have to hit colliders. We'll set it to 2. We'll select hand left, and I'm clicking this little dot over to the side just to bring up like a browser, and then hand right. And there you go. That's all you need to do. Now you can push around your skirt. You can do the same thing with your hair. It's the exact same process, you're just applying it somewhere else. But on this particular model, there's something wrong with the hair. It's mixed in with all this other garbage. So how do I apply a dynamic bone script that won't make my eyes move around when I just want my hair to move around? So that's pretty easy. What we're going to do is we're going to copy this component for the dynamic bone because I kind of like the settings. Let's hit paste as new. And we're going to copy head here. Now this may not be advisable to use the actual head bone. I would probably create a hair root, a lot like how I created a skirt root here, because you may be interrupting some of this animation scripts that run on the head. So this is probably not the best practice to do. Do at your own risk, it may cause problems. But anyways, we'll keep all the rest of these settings because they're mostly fine. But if we move around a model right now, you'll see that my eyes move. Which, while funny looking, is, oh God, Jesus, that's terrifying, is not the intent. So what we're going to do is we're going to add exclusions. And I know from previous experience, I think I have 10 exclusions or maybe 12. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to do. So what we'll do is let's go back here. We're going to call this size of exclusions array 12. And you just go through and you drag in each particular one that you want to not move. So this one, I'm probably just going to fill this dead air with thinking sounds so I don't lose concentration or count. Because it's very, I always lose track of like which ones I've already dragged in, like I just did. Eyebrow, glasses, hair ribbon, which I usually have a separate script for so I can change the settings, tear control, and tongue. So now, if I move it around, you'll see that her eyes no longer go crazy. Instead, her hair just moves. Wonderful. And if I remove the hair ribbon by setting this to none, you can now see that the hair ribbon is going to move around as, ooh, that's the wrong drag. Will also move around. So there you go. So that just about covers dynamic bones and colliders. They're pretty straightforward. It is a really cool asset. It's well worth the $20. However, you need to be mindful of performance with it. I would not upload this particular model with the amount of dynamic bones on it. I mean, what was that we counted earlier? 28 times 6. So yeah, that's like 150 bones. I must have miscounted before. So I would not upload this because it has way too many. That's way too much CPU load for myself and for other people. But if you just do what I actually have on this model in my live version is I only have my hair animated. So if I do, let's remove this component. So this is how mine is currently working. I don't have colliders either, just because I'm lazy. But my hair still moves around on my version that I have up currently. Oh, additionally, you may want to try playing around with gravity, but gravity has some weird effects. In particular, if you look at what happens when I rotate my model. I need to change this to negative. Negative 0.1. There. Let's rotate it a little bit more. So you can see that it doesn't... See, weird things happen when you apply gravity to a lot of these things. It may be because I have inert set so high. That's actually a good question. Let's do some live testing here. No? Sort of. I don't know. I don't use gravity. It doesn't work well for me. Force may work better. Never mind. I'm going to leave it off. Okay, well, that's basically all I've got here. In conclusion, Dynamic Bones is pretty awesome. Be careful with it, but if you use it in clever ways, you can come up with all kinds of crazy stuff you can do with it. That's pretty much it. Thanks.